Hey, it's been about 3 weeks. Time for another update. I got a little inspiration behind me in the form of the RC Carbon Cub. I haven't got much done in the last 3 weeks. Waiting on a couple parts, and I made a big mistake, which set me back a little bit. I'll show you here in the video. And then also, all the bad luck. The whole family ended up getting coronavirus. So we were on lockdown and stuck at home for a couple weeks. We didn't get it that bad, luckily. I feel for all those that have or were affected by it more than we were. Just sick for a couple days. Some lingering fatigue and headaches, but other than that, we're all good. And we're back to healthy, and I'm back to running every morning. So anyway, on to the build update. Yeah, so for those that don't know, this is what it'll look like when it's done. Not this color, but that's what a Carbon Cub looks like. Yeah, the right wing's coming along. It looks really complete. It's not done. We got a lot more to do, but you can see it's taken the shape of the airfoil, and lots more pieces are coming together. So what you're going to do is you set your spars, the front and rear spars, with these compression tubes in between, and then you rivet in all these center ribs. The main ribs, except for you don't want to, number 8 here on the back, you don't want to rivet in this one just yet. It's got these stainless steel pop rivets because you're going to want to be able to move it out of the way a little bit to put the rivets in for the trailing edge ribs to attach. There's 3 ribs, top and bottom, that attach, and it's just easier to get to them if you can move that out of the way. So yeah, you put the center ribs in, except for that one, and then we trammel the ring or square it, and we do that by using our modified framing square. Pretty low tech, but heck, they built the pyramids with that stuff, right? So square up the first bay, and then we run string lines along the spars, and it's all in the videos and in other people's builds. It took me 3 tries to do it right. I'd square up this first bay, use these drag wires, these angled wires, and you set the tension on them. First you square it, then you set the tension by putting a scale on there and pulling with 13 to 15 pounds of deflection. If you deflect a 1/2 inch at 13 to 15 pounds, you got the right tension set on these things. So anyway, you get this one. I'd get this one set, square with this compression tube right here, and then you run the string lines all the way down to the end, front and rear spar, and set the rest of these, same thing with that tension. Well, what was happening is, as you can imagine, the force as you set these to tension, believe it or not, these bows, you can probably see it a little bit, these compression tubes actually bow a little bit, and so I didn't like the way that looked, so I ended up redoing this. I think it took the 4th time till I got it where I liked where it was. And this is really important to get this straight, because back here is where your aileron attaches at these 3 separate spots that are pretty far apart, and it's got to slide right in just right. So got that done. So just take your time when you go to do that. The aileron hangers are pretty cool. They're the billet aluminum, and also don't forget to put the bolts in on the number 12 and the number 5 double rib, because if you don't put those in before you rivet the ribs in, you won't get the bolts in there, because as you can see, they're the bolts and the washers, and then the lock nuts. Also, these really cool billet machined ribs need to get Cherry Max riveted in as well, these structural rivets. These have to pull perfectly straight, and it's really tight in here. So it's a common issue that you end up having to modify the rivet puller, and I had to grind the living heck out of one, and it still works, believe it or not, but it's almost all gone. And use that so you can reach up in there and pull these rivets. This thing's still working great, believe it or not, even with all that material gone. Some people end up putting a wedge in there to get it to pull straight. I didn't have to. It worked out fine with this. So yeah, do whatever you need to do to get those rivets pulled perfectly straight. Actually, it's on this rib, or this hanger here. So yeah, we got it squared, got the hangers on with our modified rivet puller, and then you're going to go ahead and put your trailing edge ribs on. Now, the instructions say 1 rivet top and bottom, these little rivets here, 1 rivet top and bottom for the flap cove area, and 2 rivets top and bottom for the aileron area. Well, there's actually, if you look in this one here, there's 3 holes in here, and so I was a little confused on that, and I ended up reaching out online and to Cub Crafters, and they got back to me, and yeah, it actually all 3 of these get filled. And you can see these are it's a flat piece of metal, so you have to match drill it to your rib, and then dimple it with your squeezer, a rivet squeezer. Puts a dimple in it so it's countersunk so that the rivets sit flush, and then squeeze or buck with a rivet gun, top and bottom 3 rivets for each one. So yeah, the instructions need updating there. Get 3 top and bottom for those, and you'll have that set just right. Also, actually, before those went on, we had to put the rear reinforcement cap strip here on the spar. This is real precise because these have to fit in between the bulbs of the spar, drilled, and these are Cherry Max rivets as well. You'll set this pulley for the aileron centered on this with a string, and there is 1 rivet here that goes all the way through this and into the spar. That is like, it's a match drilled rivet, and there's a couple countersunk rivets in here so that you can move this and get it nice and flat and where it's supposed to be. The instructions say set it off of this rib here, I think most people, what they're doing is they're actually setting this with this string here that goes from here to here so they can get this perfectly straight, rather than setting it off that, because this is the critical part, and then you match drill every one of these holes. And I used my my caliper, and every 6-inch to make sure it was perfectly straight, and then match drilled through. Use your drill stop. You don't want to nick this spar, because if you do, it's no good. And that's where we get on to my mistake we'll talk about in a little bit. Also, these drag wires here too, you've got these blocks. These are the lift strut attachments. This is what adds structure to hold the wing in place. A metal bar goes from there down to the fuselage at an angle for this big wing here. Anyway, the inside ones are not drilled. These inside blocks here are not drilled, so you'll end up drilling through this and setting that hole for this drag wire to go in. So yeah, you have to do that on 1, 2, 3, 4 of these. Once it's the wings trammeled and squared, you'll also install this angled compression tube, and that's bolted in place. Yeah, so these, you just pay real attention to which ones go where. I actually have more time into studying the instructions than I do into actual building. Now that I've done this once, I think I could build both these wings in about 2 days, but it takes a long time to really look at the bits and pieces closely and make sure you're doing it right to the instructions. So yeah, I've got that in. That's all squared up, and this wing is well on its way. I was waiting on one of these trailing edge ribs. Now that I have that, I can finish up this false spar. False spar is this sheet metal you see here, and that's where the aileron and the flap go. Flap obviously inboard, aileron outboard, and these will just get squared up perfectly straight with the spar, match drilled and riveted in place. And then we'll set the aileron in here to set the distance to make sure we have the precise distance for these hangers, so everything works out just right. And then this will actually be not perfectly square, because once we put the fabric on it, stretches, it'll bow in. But there's a measurement for that, and I haven't got that far, so I'll fill you in on how that went and how I did that when I get to that point. So we have to set these perpendicular square to the spar, but also it's really important that they're set to the right depth. It's really critical, and we use Cub Crafters supplies these tools to go in the set this on the Jeep here so I can show you. because you have to set the angle and the distance of these false spars perfectly. And they go in here, and you will end up setting these distance, drilling these holes, and riveting in place with these neat tools. And you can see there's bolt holes in these three, and they actually go through the holes in the hanger there, so that everything's set to the right depth as you it's a template, right, to get it set in the right spot. So yeah, now on to, sorry about that, on to the mistake, the big, huge mistake I made that I hope you don't make, and you shouldn't. It was really dumb, but as an amateur, I guess we do things, and I tend to like to get things done really quickly. And you can see this wing is not nearly as far along, and the reason why is I ended up nicking this front main spar with my drill bit. And it was just a silly, stupid little mistake, and it's a tiny little nick, but this is the main structure that holds up the entire airplane, and a little nick can end up propagating into a crack at some point. So this spar is junk. So unfortunately, I have to rebuild this entire wing. I'll just chalk it up to paying for an expensive education. It is what it is. What are you gonna do? So we'll move on. I got the new part coming. Luckily, Cub Crafters was pretty quick with that. I think I'll get that any day now, and it'll only take me probably a day, maybe two. I've already, actually, I would say just a day. I've already drilled out all these rivets. This thing's ready to come apart. I just got to pull the attachments that are bolted on, and the fuel tank straps. Yeah. Also, I probably didn't show you. These are the straps that hold the fuel tanks in. All those aren't in. All these are. So you got ones that go down below, and then ones that go over top and bolt in to bolt the fuel tank. And I still have to put the felt strips in there to protect the fuel tanks. But yeah, so this wing, real bummer, held me back. But like I said, I got sick, and I wasn't able to do anything or leave the house for 2 weeks. So it kind of, I guess everything happens for a reason. Really glad that we have the antibodies in us, our whole family, so we can kind of move on. But anyway, yeah, that wing has to get rebuilt. So yeah, while I was waiting to get the wing going, I finally got that part I needed for that wing today, so we can finish that wing up. But while I was waiting, we decided to get going on the fuselage. And we start with the fuselage by putting some of these sub-assemblies together. These are the rudder pedals with the brakes attached. So you've got the rudder pedal, and then the toe brakes. So you move the rudder with the full pedal, and then you articulate your foot to apply the brakes. This is the master cylinder for the brakes. One thing about these two is that you use, there's a couple areas in here where they talk about using Easy Lube, fuel lube, and that's a no-no. You use thread locker. So when that comes up, it's still in the instructions for a couple parts on the fuel system. You use your normal thread sealant for that. So anyway, also you'll need some green Loctite for the torque tube. This is the torque tube that connects the control sticks together, front and rear. Green Loctite was not available for me easily, so I ended up having to order it online. So you just get some of that coming. And this is the jack screw, the elevator jack screw assembly, so that you can trim the pitch of the elevator. You're gonna end up having to sand down this torque tube a little bit to fit into these holes, and then match drill it, and like green Loctite it up. We can't rivet both ends, otherwise we wouldn't be able to get it through the seat base, because the control yoke goes through that seat base there. So once we get that assembled, all these sub-assemblies together, then we'll start bolting them to the floor of the airplane, and then the floor of the airplane will go in the fuselage. Same tote with all the really cool labels, really handy for getting parts to put your stuff together. So yeah, we started the fuselage. You can see I got the stringers, these carbon fiber things that hold the shape of the fuselage are clamped to it. Spent a couple hours last night, got those set and trimmed. She used a Dremel tool with the sanding disc on them. Worked great in a respirator, and would have been nice to have two hands to help put these on, because you're working, you got the glue going, so you're working against the clock to get it done quickly. Worked out fine. Just used bungees and tapes and springs, but it would have been a lot easier with some help. So yeah, we got those in along with the bottom stringer, carbon fiber tube there. bungeed in place and these blocks glued in. One of these blocks you're gonna have to cut because there's an X in here, whereas the original Carbon Cub SS only had one in. So, and then also you need to sand and drill little holes in these blocks so that they will, the glue will hold them better. That's not something that's in the instructions, but on the forums people talk about these don't hold well unless you do that. So we got those in. Got the spacer for the fabric here on the door glued in. Got the fuel selector valve. This is where they talk about using Easy Lube. Apparently that stuff's not good and it leaks, so use the thread locker for those. And then also you have these little compression fittings where the fuel line goes in. In here, I just have them taped off so stuff doesn't get in there. There'll be a knob here to select, you know, the fuel on, off, left, right tanks. And you can see this is the low point drain for the fuel system. So we're just putting little sub-assemblies in. But this is the little plastic piece I was talking about here. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's kind of blurry, but there's a little fitting that goes in here. You just need to make sure you pop the little lip through that before you get too far. This is the low point drain for the fuel system. So the fabric will go right here, and then there will be a drain that sticks right through so you can sump any water out of your fuel system. Yeah, I got that glued on last night. Also, this is the extended baggage door. You want to make sure you get that set in place before you glue this stringer in, because you will need to trim the stringer around it. And if you don't do that, if you forget, then your door's not going to fit. So it's in the instructions, but just something to remember. Extended baggage is, you got the pilot up here, co-pilot or passenger here. Regular baggage would be in this bay with between these two bars. And then this is the extended baggage kit, and includes the door and aluminum panels that go inside the tubes to line it. Allows for more cargo, longer items, fishing poles, whatever. But anyway, that's a big deal for me, for camping, backcountry flying, all that stuff. So yeah, there we go. Fuselage has begun, well on its way. We'll keep going there. Again, really bummed about this wing, but we'll get that going, no big deal. Stuff happens. So back to the build.